Today we are going to talk all things commissions because, as most of you know, the rules have changed in real estate across the nation. And we are going to talk about how those new rules regarding commissions affects both sellers and buyers. And if you stick around to the end of this video, I'm going to share with you who I think really pays the commissions.
Moving to Southern Missouri is the best thing I've ever done for my family.
So as most of you know, there was a huge groundbreaking lawsuit called the Sitzer-Burnett case. And that was actually focused here in Missouri. It actually looked at property owners, sellers from 2014 primarily through 2015 in Columbia, mostly Columbia and St. Louis. And this lawsuit was also initiated by Michael Ketchmark. And when I say initiated, I do mean that Michael Ketchmark pursued the plaintiffs in this civil suit. And so far, all we know is that roughly 1.8 billion with a capital B dollars has been awarded. Now, I don't think all of that has been paid out. Ironically, Michael Ketchmark, who is arguing that realtors have been conspiring to keep commissions high, as if we all get together and have some sort of secret meeting on what we are going to set commissions at. And his commissions were about 33% of that ruling. So as far as I have heard, he's got about 33% of 1 billion so far. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see where his motivations lie. But to fully understand this and what has changed, we need to go back in time to how things were in real estate. So pretty much, for the most part, the sellers in residential real estate paid the buyer agent's commission. Now, I want to highlight that that's in residential. Commercial has always been just a huge mixture of different negotiations that are often come up with at the negotiation table and not like a pre-agreed upon commission amount by the seller. But in residential, it was usually agreed upon that the seller would pay commissions. Now, I have seen all and everything. I have seen sellers set a specific amount. They will pay X amount of dollars towards the commissions. I have seen 1%, 2%, 2.5%, 3%. I've seen 3.5%. And usually on the buyer side, like what the seller's offering, you don't see above that. Usually when they do have a high commission rate, which for a lot of those, you actually will see 8 to 10%. So luxury, very common. You see 10% commission asked for by the listing agent. And with a lot of those kind of exclusive outdoorsy kind of brokerages, often you see 8%. Now, the truth is those brokerages very, very rarely split that commission evenly between a buyer's agent. So often with like especially like the outdoors ones that I've worked for, it's like they're getting 8% and they're maybe going to share like 2.5% and then keep the remaining percentage for their own, where, you know, they're bringing in a lot of money by doing that. But I would say the majority of realtors, so remember, REALTOR, that's our designation. We're part of NAR. We'll talk about that by force. We're forcefully part of NAR. We're part of, you know, a local board. And we, for the most part, I would say would split whatever commission we negotiated with a seller, we would split it 50-50 with the buyer side. Seller side splits it with the buyer side. Now, I have seen tons of different variations amongst, you know, realtors as well. And I would say actually a lot of the time, maybe not the majority of the time, but a lot of the time I see realtors, so that's people who are part of NAR and a local board, usually keep 0.5 or 1% more to themselves. So that's not uncommon. The argument I've heard is, it costs a lot of money to list a property. People, if you're doing it right, are spending at minimum $1,000. If you're doing, that can go up significantly as well. But if you're doing marketing right, you're really rolling out like at least a month of solid marketing. What we like to tell our sellers is that we like to actually ramp up our marketing effort. So instead of like putting it on the MLS and sitting back, we're going to continually be rolling out different strategies, and often they cost a lot of money and time, so that argument is not totally unfounded of why the listing agent believes they should keep more. I do not agree with it. And really, I never agreed with it. So I am just a split it down the middle kind of lady. If there was somehow like an extra half point, or it was a weird split, I kind of feel like I would just offer that to the buyer side as incentive. Now, I could see certain situations where I maybe would justify it if a property was really difficult, like if I had done unusual work to list it. So I'm talking, there's all sorts of things that you can do as a realtor, like spending a couple months trying to get a zoning change, or just so many things that you don't really sometimes get paid for. That's almost like, it's definitely outside the scope of what a realtor usually does. So I do a lot of that stuff often. But so far, I've never kept anything extra from the buyer side. I do believe that, I don't know if it's even incentive, because I think that like a buyer's agent's gonna come and show a property for 2.5% pretty much regardless, especially if that's what their client wants to see. I personally I don't feel like realtors will be like, no, the commission, there wasn't the commission there, I'm not going to show you it. And I don't necessarily think that realtors are steering because of commission, like, oh, they're only offering 2.5%. I've never actually heard a realtor say that. Like, I am not wanting to show properties that are 2.5%. But here's why I like to split it down the middle and not take like an extra 0.5% or whatever it is. Is it integrity? I don't even know. It's just, I guess, I've always been a team player, and sometimes it is hard. I want to admit this when you do, and that you have done hundreds of hours of work on a deal that the other side has not. And I have heard the voice in my head start to get snarky, and they don't deserve this. And I just try to turn that voice off, because I like the feeling of like reciprocity. I like the feeling of, I hate to say equality, because we live in such a toxic culture that's like kind of like destroyed that word. So I don't totally understand it, other than there's something inside my being, some sort of integrity that makes me want to split the commission evenly. So that is how it has mostly functioned. But like I've said, there's been all and everything in between, so, and I don't know what this whole idea of commissions being fixed always at 6%. We've listed at 5%. Actually, what I'm starting to think that I'm going to do is I'm just going to actually start to offer 5% as an option. And then 6% is going to be red carpet service. And that means that I'm going to be so doggedly spending money and spending time marketing your property well above what I know the majority of realtors is doing, that I can just tell you, listen, this is a service. And for me to go and take that much time away from my family and put my, self at such like kind of, it's a stress. This is the price for that. Now, for 5%, here's what I'll do. And so I'm starting to think, and maybe I'll even take it down and be like, and 4%, here's what I'll do. I'll do all your contracts. I'll list it. I'm going to take photos myself. I'm not sure, but maybe that's what commissions need to look like, is just like a scalable service. You've got your high-end marketing that's going to be the most expensive videographer, the most expensive photographer, and then it goes down from there. So I have considered doing that. But the idea that there's a conspiracy that realtors have fixed the price at 6%, I believe is wrong. I do think that the lawyer that started this battle has a few $100 million in his pocket, and yeah, I think that was his incentive for initiating this lawsuit. And I also want to say, as I mentioned, we are definitely, being part of NAR, which is the National Association of Realtors, is not consensual. It is mandatory. I personally have had issue with that, but I have even more issue with it seeing how NAR fought this case. I don't know if their lawyers were tongue-tied, partially brain dead. I mean, it was bad. I'm going to bring up some basic arguments that should have been fought at that case that were not, that are so blatant and such an obvious angle that you would fight that case, and yet they were never uttered or brought up during the trial. And I would say that just seeing the way that NAR's lawyers handled themselves is enough reason for me to completely want to disassociate from NAR. If I was given a choice, I would not be a member of NAR. And here's the one argument that people give for why NAR is so essential, is that they are, on the front lines in Washington, D.C., and they're lobbying for laws to protect real estate investors, and also entrepreneurs, people who file 1099s. And what I would say is, I do believe that we need that type of lobbying. If NAR is so incompetent to not even battle basic legal points in the Sitzer-Burnett trial, then what kind of job are they doing lobbying for us? They could not be competent in my mind at this point. Now, there are other groups that are lobbying similar and often the same issues as NAR, and honestly, I would rather give my money to them. But alas, I do not have a choice. So to be a realtor, not realtor, I have to be a member of NAR. So that is that. But I would like to bring up the points that should have been argued in the case that were not. The first point that I would have made if I was a NAR attorney is I would have every plaintiff that testified, I would have gotten a copy of their contract, and I would have pointed at their signature and said, "Is this your signature?" And they would have been like, "Yes, that's my signature." And I would say, "Were you coerced to sign this document?" And they would maybe say, "Well, no, but I did feel pressured by the realtor to sign." And I would say, "How did you contact this realtor? Did they come to you or did you come to them?" And maybe they would say, "No, actually they called me, and I felt like I liked them. I thought they would do a good job, and so I agreed to a listing appointment," in which case they, described to me the terms of the contract and the commissions that they were seeking. And so I would pretty much suss it out over time that no one held a gun to their head. There was no law that forced them, one, to even hire a realtor. Put it on Zillow yourself, take your pictures with your cell phone, have at it. I do not judge people who do that. I do know that they literally, in terms of analytics, do not sell their properties as often or for as much as a properly marketed property. That's fact. Okay, that's fact. And everybody's free to do that. You can do so many things. You can do these you could hire a cheap brokerage. They're going to charge you 1%. All they're going to do is list your property and put it on the MLS. And then anyone who's interested in your property won't even be able to get through to a human to set up a showing. Those are out there and you can hire them, right? Or you can decide to go to a realtor or a realtor, right? Anyone who still is licensed in some way, and you can decide to pay more for more access, more marketing, all of those things, right? And you may hire a good one, you may not do enough homework, and you may hire a bad one. Sellers, that's on you. I'm telling you the truth, that's on you. Do your due diligence before you hire anyone. Contractor, realtor, mechanic, attorney, if you have someone tutoring your kids, the list goes on and on. It is most certainly the obligation of the consumer to do research and to pick professionals who they believe will do the best job. And sometimes they still don't, and then you have the opportunity to fire them. And you know what the truth is? Most realtors, not all, but I would say most, at least 50%, will mutually dissolve a contract if you're not happy, if you just ask, right? So there is that as well. But here's what these people did. They hired someone consensually. They signed a contract, agreed upon a commission consensually. Then that person actually did what they said they were going to do and got the property sold for them. And then after the property was closed and they paid the commissions, which they had already agreed to, they then have a problem and want recourse. How about this? I've got a great idea, because you want to know what? Now those plaintiffs are seeking extra billions, because guess what? The lawyers only gave them like $100. Yeah, after all that big multi-year trial, they're gonna pocket, I don't know, 50 to $100. So now they want to try to get more money because they want 15,000. That's what the lawyers said they were gonna get. They didn't get it. So there's some irony there. They didn't even get the money from the lawyers. So here's what I say. At this point, you should sue Michael Ketchmark for your 15K. Okay? He's got a couple $100 million in his pocket. So maybe that's who the disgruntled sellers should go after. So what does this mean? Where are we at? How are the new laws being enacted and enforced now? So the language people are mostly using is that we have decoupled commissions and the obligation of the seller, meaning now everything is up for negotiation. It is actually prohibited for any agent to list available or any kind of offered commissions on the MLS. I don't even totally understand that. Like, why? Why can't you list it? Because they don't want any communication formally on like the back end of the listing that realtors can see, that we would know what property has what commission. So that is now illegal. We also have to always have a buyer sign a buyer's agency agreement before viewing a home. So pretty much in short, those are like the big new changes. So you always have to sign a buyer agency agreement. Realtors are not allowed to disclose or list any type of, really anything. You can call it commissions, compensations, or anything that would even hint at concessions that are for the buyer's agent. Illegal. Cannot speak. Mum is the word. That bothers me, not even as an agent, but just as like a constitutionalist and like free market enterprise kind of lady. If I want to hire someone to sell anything of mine, and I want to offer money, I want to offer a beautiful pony, I truly believe it is my right in what should be a free market world to offer that freely and to be able to market that, hey, here's what I'll give you if you come and buy this from me. Here's some extra bonus. I don't see why that should be illegal. So what I've chosen to do is create a very non-committal buyer's agency contract. Exclusive still, meaning that while you sign that for the time period that we set together, you are exclusive to me. But I want it to be very non-committal in the sense that I always want my work to the force that creates loyalty, not a contract. So buyers beware. A lot of agents are just fast talking it, and they're having you sign something that you are becoming exclusive only to them for 6 to 12 months, and you do not even realize what you signed. The other thing that a lot of agents are doing is they are roping the buyer into paying the 3% or 2% or whatever their price is for their commission, and they aren't communicating like whether or not they've already negotiated that or whether or not they might expect that the buyer will have to pay for that. So what I've done instead is every time you sign an exclusive buyer agency contract with me, I am going to have pre-negotiated the commissions on the seller's side before we even go and view those properties. If there's anything that's outside of the norm in terms of, so like let's say that they're only going to offer 1%, right? And I do require 3%. Now I will reduce my commission to 2.5% in most situations, I do that actually a lot just to make deals go, but I don't work for 1%. Unless it was a really, it depends. Like, I guess if it was like a luxury deal, would I work for 1%? Yeah. But am I going to bust my tail? I mean, some of my buyers, y'all, and if you're out there, you know what? I've been working for you for a year. So you do the math on what that means for what I'm getting paid an hour. Even if I make 10 grand off commissions, which is for around here, that's a good paycheck. If I've been working for you for a year, I probably would do better at McDonald's. And that's just the stone cold hard truth of being a buyer's agent. It is a lot of work and very often for no pay even. I've worked with a lot of people for a year and then they've changed their minds, and that is very hard. But that's the life of commissions. So I would say that people need to kind of realize that there's very few industries that you can have someone work for you for weeks, months, a year for free. So just take note of that. Be aware of what you're expecting. And what I would say is that at this point in the game, I'm confident in my negotiation skills and I am pre-negotiating with the seller side. And that's how I'm rolling right now. Now, if we get to a point where the majority of sellers are refusing to pay any kind of compensation to the buyer's agent side, I will have to recalibrate and to pivot. And what I would say, sorry, but either the buyers are going to pay my commission and that can be wrapped up into their loan, or I'm just going to be a listing agent because I don't have time to work for people for free for 3 to 12 months, which is kind of your average time that you spend with buyers. And so, yeah, that's that. But right now, what we have is most sellers are seeing that money is tight right now, and it makes sense. It truly makes sense for commissions to come out of the side that has the big check. So another point I want to make of what upset me about this court ruling is that the ones that are going to get the most hurt are struggling first home buyers. So I want you to picture this scenario. You have first-time home buyers who have zero experience of what to expect in a real estate transaction. They sign an exclusive agency contract with a realtor that doesn't explain it. They've just signed exclusive with this realtor for maybe 6 to 12 months. They didn't realize it. They also signed that they will pay that realtor 3%. Okay, and they're kind of confused. They don't really understand even what that means, right? So then they start to go and they start to shop for homes. And little do they know, they're looking at some homes because their realtor's not communicating with them that are not offering any compensation for their agent. And that's actually the other point that I would have argued if I was an NAR lawyer, is that who this is really going to affect is the pool of people that the government is supposed to want to protect. Because you have to remember, all of this too has been pushed by the Department of Justice. Yes, the Department of Justice has nothing better to do than to go after commissions in real estate. In fact, if you want to know how juicy it gets, the DOJ has come out and said, you know what, we're not done. The next move we want to make is we want to make it illegal for a seller to offer any kind of compensation, commission, or concession towards the buyer side agent, even if it's not on the MLS. Right now, we secretly, clandestino, we can speak to each other and negotiate commissions, right? But we have to can't say it anywhere public. But they want to make even private negotiations regarding commissions illegal. And you know what they said with that statement? They said that buyers don't need representation. I'm sorry, government. that's none of your business. And there are so many problems that we face right now. I would prefer if the Department of Justice spent as much time, let's say, on how concerned they are about real estate commissions. How about they spend that much time looking into the derailment in Palestine, Ohio? But I guess the Department of Justice just can't figure out other things to do with their time. So it looks like they're going to be meddling in real estate for quite a while. Definitely lots of threats of opening up, not just starting new lawsuits. The DOJ says that they now are inserting into all of their, the fine print in their lawsuits and the cases they're fighting, that they can reopen them at any time. And so they actually have done it. So they took a case, the lawsuit was fought and it was closed and it was done. And the Department of Justice reopened it for re-litigation. And here's what's even better. Guess who voted to make that decision? The Department of Justice. So the Department of Justice can make a vote and decide that it's legal to start opening up old cases, and they get to fight the case. They get to make the decisions about whether or not that's legal or not. So pretty interesting. I would say, yeah, it just is what it is, right? The government spends their time where I guess they feel that they can make the most change. So here's the spicy part maybe you guys have been waiting for. At the beginning of the video, I said, I'm going to tell you who I think pays the commissions and has always paid the commissions. Now, don't get your panties in a bunch, sellers. It ain't you. I mean, it's kind of like which came first, the chicken or the egg, but it is arguable that the buyers have always paid commissions. Now, of course, then you could extrapolate it further and you could say, well, actually, no, it's not the buyer, the seller, it's the property. The property is this neutral asset that produces this money that can pay for agency on either side, right? So I could hear that argument. Or you could say, well, no, it's the seller. The seller has either held that property intelligently and pushed equity, or they forced equity with sweat labor. It is the seller. And I hear that argument too, actually, totally. But when it all comes down to it, the money that was brought to the table has always come from the buyer. Now, how we want to conceptualize it may change, and how we want to negotiate it will always change. But the truth is, it is the buyer that comes and puts that money on the table, right? And yeah, I think that there's evidence of that when you look at now how some lenders, like I said, the VA loans, it's already written into their bylaws that buyer agent commission can be wrapped up into a loan now. And how is that any different than, okay, so let's rewind and go back in time, and that same buyer who had their VA loan gets a loan to buy a home. They pay it to the seller. The seller paid the buyer's agent and the seller's agent. The seller paid both agents out of the same loan that buyer produced. So now we fast forward to where we are now, and that same person gets the same amount of money through a VA loan, and now from that money, the seller will pay their agent, right? And that same loan, the same chunk of money will also pay the buyer side, but instead of saying that it came from the seller, we now say that it came from the buyer, but it's the same chunk of moolah. Do you guys see what I'm saying? So in my mind, technically, as it has always been, the buyer, whether it's cash or a loan or however they produce a chunk of moolah, the commissions are paid from that. So I think what we're doing is we're reconceptualizing most of these points in our mind. And if you guys are one of my clients, we will spend time going over all of these details. I will walk through any details that seem confusing to you. I want every single one of my clients to understand real estate better than they ever have after leaving a transaction with me. And yes, that does take time to communicate, and I'm willing to do that. So I hope this video, helped you guys out, for those of you that have been confused about what has even been going on in real estate regarding commissions. As always, all my information is in the description. Give me a call, text, Zoom, and we can set up an appointment and we can answer all your real estate questions.